Check out this cool box. I've never seen one of these before. It's probably from the 90s to the early 2000s, but what's in here is from 1980. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Today we're going to talk about ultra-rare Norlin-era colors. So rare that most people don't even know they exist. But to learn about them, let's talk about this real quick. It's a Flying V2. It was first introduced in 1979, but it's mainly considered an 80s instrument. They had these weird boomerang pickups that sounded like single coils, and they weren't necessarily the best sellers. In fact, in their final year of production, 1982, Gibson just said, alright, just put humbuckers in them. But to help sell some of those, they gave them very exotic colors. Your standard ones were just maple or walnut on the top in alternating patterns, but then they also did Goldburst and Silverburst, or all these other ones that you can see from this beautiful collection. But I want to focus on these three: Bahama Blue Sparkle, Cherry Sparkle, and Black Sparkle. These are crazily rare finishes, and since those colors existed on those models, that means you have a very small, minute chance that it could exist on other models in that time too. So even though we just learned about V2s, what we're talking about today is actually one of those special Les Pauls. So needless to say, I'm pretty excited to add this one to my personal collection. It's got a Gen 3 chainsaw case, missing the badge unfortunately, so maybe I'll replace it with something else. But this one kind of falls under the category of it's too rare that people just don't really know about it, so let's go ahead and teach people about it. Inside here, my friends, is a regular Les Paul Standard in Cherry Sparkle finish. Oh yeah, that looks just like the L6 that we had just documented not too long ago. But actually, I would say it's even better. Like, this is very nice dancing sparkle. So essentially what this is just a cherry Les Paul Standard, which in and of itself, that's a fairly rare color, but it's very similar to a wine red, so there's definitely cheaper alternatives out there. But they just threw some sparkles in the clear coat, it looks like. Because it's not just sparkly on the top, they also sparkle the back of the neck, the headstock, the entire back of the guitar. It's just kind of one of those interesting, quirky finishes. But if all that wasn't even enough for you, wait till you see the headstock. That's where these things truly look goofy, because you got the sparkles up here without the color finish underneath it. And usually when you get a sparkle guitar, you don't actually see the wood grain underneath it, so it's just kind of a very interesting beast. And as far as the internet's concerned, this is the only Cherry Sparkle Les Paul Standard that I've actually seen come out. But since we know about the other Cherry Sparkle models, we can know that it's actually a legit finish out there. But as far as the rest of the specs, this really is just a regular Les Paul Standard of the era. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of Norlin era Les Paul Standards. I'm all about the Les Paul Deluxe and the Les Paul Custom when it comes to the 70s, because I feel they pull the big headstock off better. The Deluxe, because it was new in that era, we didn't have anything else to compare it to. And then the Customs, they always just look good with all the binding around them. But we'll learn more about the specs of this one over on the workbench. Let's talk about how I got this one. So it sat on Reverb for quite some time because they wanted like $15,000 for it. I had ended up receiving a private offer for it, which, I mean, it wasn't still a steal of a deal, but through the course of a couple of weeks, this one had to take a trip from the UK back to my personal collection in the USA, and I actually found a cool little treat. Over here in the case, when you flip up the Gibson lid, apparently maybe Norm's Rare Guitars had this at one point in time, or this thing's just played case swapperoonie. You know, it looks like a Les Paul Standard imprint, but there really is no way to know for sure. But just for fun here, let's learn about some other cool rare Norlin era colors. So there was also just a regular Bahama Blue that didn't have the sparkle flake in it. You can't forget about the Basalt Blue Sparkle and the Rocket Red Sparkles. That's very famously used on the Les Paul Deluxe. We documented them in these episodes. There's also the Sparkle/Glitter L6 Midnight Specials. We just recently talked about those. You've got the Glitter Cream, as well as the Burgundy Sparkle. There is Silver/Pewter in the 80s. Sometimes people call it Silver Sky, sometimes people call it Silver Streak, but Silver Streak is actually a name of a model, so there's a little bit of debate there. There's a really rare Holly Green out there on Flying V and Les Paul Standards. Candy Apple Red is extremely rare with a gold undercoat. You can tell it's gold because they have a much darker hue than the silver base coat, so most you see are silver base coat. And the reason for that, when they use that gold undercoat, it caused the finish to have this orange peel effect. So that's why they swapped it over, and that's why Goldburst didn't last too long, and why there's so many different hues. But you might enjoy the beautiful charcoal metallic, also sometimes called gunmetal gray by people. There's just a whole bunch of interesting custom colors out there in low production runs. It's impossible to create an exhaustive list because there's new discoveries made all the time. But to learn more about this very interesting Cherry Sparkle beauty, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. Inside our Sparkle Beauty. This was by no means a filthy guitar when I got it, but man, after my polish job, this thing just came back to life. This is the very last year of T-top pickups. So this is a May 7th of 1980 T-top. After 1981, we pretty well get into Tim Shaw PAFs, unless they're just using up stuff. And then our bridge pickup, looks like it might say May 21st or maybe 11th of 1979. It's not too uncommon to find date stamps that don't necessarily match, especially towards the end as they were using them up. So we definitely need to look in our control cavity to make sure nothing has been replaced, because if they are about a year apart, you definitely need to check. But that bridge T-top reads 7.58 k ohms, which is right where it should be. 7.47 in the neck, and our middle, just for fun, 3.76. Typically T-tops range between 7.2 and 7.5-ish. But as far as our pickup cavity here, it's a short neck tenon, as is common in this era. But you can also see the glitter within the clear coat in the cavity as well. Bridge pickup cavity, pretty much more of the same. But you can see the maple top sitting on your mahogany body. So the Les Paul Standard gets reintroduced around 1976. Are there custom ordered deluxe that have the full routed humbuckers stock from the factory? Yes, but those are just a little bit different. So you can say 1976 through 1980 is one era of Les Paul Standards. And then when they switch over into the Tim Shaw PAFs, that's a different one. But in the era that we're talking about today, it's typically 3-piece maple tops with a mahogany body. They aren't weight relieved until 1983. 3-piece maple necks with the rosewood fretboard, and I mean, that's pretty much exactly what this is, except for the top. I didn't even know to expect this when I purchased it. It's actually a 2-piece top. But to be honest, once you start to get into the 80s, that becomes a little bit more common than it did in the 70s. Unfortunately, the bridge on this example has been replaced. Looks like some sort of a Japanese-made part. It's really heavy, but an original 1980 bridge would look like this. This was from my parts drawer. I was going to restore this, but I'm pretty sure this is more of a nickel one rather than the chrome that I need. But the ID that you'd be looking for is the Made in Germany over here. I'm also pretty confident that this tailpiece has been replaced, not because the casting mark looks too terrible, but if you look on the edge, it has an additional casting, and that tells me it is not original. But the other thing that tipped me off is when I pulled this out of the case, the chrome plating was actually flaking off of it. So I think one day I might replace this with error-correct Gibson parts. They're cheap enough. But it's just your regular Nashville-style bridge. It's not an ABR1 like the prehistorics get. But in 1980, they're just starting to get thought about in dealer custom orders, essentially. But it does look like we might have Sustain Sister studs on this one over on our tailpiece. That's what that extra circle is around the base. And we just have our standard controls, 2 volumes, 2 tones, and we've got the golden speed knobs on this example. They look vintage to me, so probably stock and original. Although it would not surprise me if our pots have different dates, because these ones turn so much faster than our tones. The top on this guitar was actually really well taken care of. I mean, if you think this is a mint condition collectible, no, it's not. Just wait till you see the back and how it kind of got chewed up on the back of the headstock. But I just love being able to see all this wood grain through the sparkle finish, because you don't normally get that. But I love this little ringy area right here. That's just perfect. It's definitely my style of guitar. And underneath our pickguard, it's also all sparkly. The worst thing condition-wise is a pretty sizable ding and chip out of the finish right here on the cutaway. And we definitely have some impressions on the top. There were also a lot of light scratches, but thankfully I was able to get those out. That about wraps it up for the top. Let's move on to our neck. We've just got your standard 22 low wide frets. You've got your acrylic trapezoid inlays, so nothing too crazy going on here. Typical rosewood fretboard. This guitar must have got dropped at one point in time, and the site of impact was right here, so it took the string and impressed the wood. But that's much better than getting like a headstock break. But it looks like you have a little bit of fingernail wear here, but I polished these frets up. They're looking great now. Now, if you can see underneath all the beautiful polishing, this was actually played quite a bit. I would suggest a level recrown on this guitar should you want to like heavily gig it, but this is mainly just a collector piece for me. It plays good enough as is. I'm just talking if somebody wanted perfection and this shows up on the market one day. There's also a really sizable ding in the binding right here. But you still have your typical 24 3/4 inch scale length with a 12-inch fretboard radius and what looks like about a 14-degree headstock pitch. And I had somebody ask me about neck angle. It looks like it's about a 4-degree pitch into the body.
I could be wrong though. I'm trying to hold the body as level as possible. As far as neck specs, 0.67 inches at the nut. The 12th is 2.05. First fret neck depth, a skinny 0.83. Then by the 12th it says almost 1, but trust me, these are thin necks. You're just starting to kind of hit the heel. Here's that neck profile at the 1st and 12th fret. This one does have a little bit more roundedness to it than some, but I would definitely still call it a slim 60s. That's one of the reasons why I'm not necessarily a big fan of 70s standards. I prefer my standards to have slightly chunkier necks, but thin necks were what were in at that time. And now my favorite part about this guitar, the weird sparkly headstock that just totally makes it look fake. I remember the first time I got that Bahama Blue Flying V2, I was like, is this really how it left the factory? And yeah, it's the truth. I want to talk about these two areas right here. I thought those were scratches when I was buying this from the seller, but it just turned out to be like a long strip of the metallic stuff. It didn't actually get chopped up finely enough to be spread out in spatters. It just kind of has a couple of lines there. In fact, I think that's the reason this seller had a hard time finding a buyer for this one, is his photos just look so strange. They were overly saturated. There's an area on the back of the headstock where I thought maybe it had a headstock repair, so I'm definitely glad I did a little bit more investigative work to A, make myself believe it wasn't a refinish, and B, that it didn't have any repairs. You've got some scratches around the outside, a small little mar right there by the tuner, and a little bit of finish checking around the edges as well. And the D and G string tuners are slightly crooked when you turn them. But here we can see our beautiful maple neck and a truss rod that hasn't been messed with too much. And yeah, it's a giant headstock, but it kind of works when you're trying to be gaudy. Moving on to the back now. So it looks pretty clean. Until you get it in the light, you can see lots of scratches and buckle marks in it. This was definitely played, but they took very good care of it, all things considered. Like here's a ding right here in the cutaway that goes through the finish. Same with another one right here. It looks like the strap buttons were probably replaced with strap locks at one point in time and then restored to a slightly more correct looking one. But you have some strap rash along the edges. And honestly, seeing some wear on a rare finish like this is nice, because somebody could take a regular wine red Les Paul standard and re-clear coat it and put some glitter in here, and most people wouldn't be the wiser. But what I found really funny having this in person is you can actually see the glitter along the binding too. I'm not sure if that was intentional by the Gibson employees or not, but that definitely confirms for me anyways that the sparkle's likely in the clear coat. But I am not a guitar painter, so maybe I don't even know what I'm talking about. There's a ding right here. Looking inside our control cavity here, yep, that's exactly what I want to see. This looks completely factory stock and original to me. That one dates to 1980, looks like 17th week. And hey, yeah, I was right, 1979 on the tone pots, so they were slightly different dates, but that is very common in the early 80s. To have two matching dates here and then two matching dates there. In fact, in 1983, there's a period of time where you'll have 83 pots and then 1980 pots. But looking here, you can see this is before they started using CNC routing machines, so it's just a long drill. And what's cool about this one is we have a ground wire on top of a shielding / grounding tin. And we've got brown back plates. This one's got some scratches. But there's our toggle switch cavity as well. Moving up the neck, pretty much more of the same. You get a little bit of flame figuring in this area, if you can see through the wood grain, but just more sparkles. And this is the spot I was talking about. I was scared it had a headstock repair because in the seller's photos, the finish looks so dark in this area. And I think it's just because at certain angles it does, because it just kind of bunches up or the shadows play with it. But in person, yeah, I definitely have no fear of any type of repair or touch-up going on here. And then up here, we can see it is made in USA vertically, so that means this is a Kalamazoo made guitar. We can also tell that due to the last three digits being 499 or less, and it dates to the 289th day of 1980. And of course, we got some chips, nicks, and dings up here along the edges. Blacklight time? Oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to see. In fact, I think this finish looks even better under blacklight. It's like a intergalactic sparkle. I really want to get one of the ebony sparkles. There was a E2 on Reverb recently that had the black sparkle finish. But looking over here, it almost looks like that might have been slightly touched up. So somebody put like a little bit of red coloring there. I don't think I'd necessarily blame them, otherwise it might stand out more. But you can definitely see a couple other like nicks and dings, and those knobs are totally original. Headstock has a nice, beautiful glow, nice and even. That's what we're looking for here, is an even glow. Because blacklights, they can't necessarily tell you if a guitar's been refinished a long time ago. That just comes down to experience and feeling the finish if it's quality. But they can help you see obvious touch-ups. And if it doesn't glow at all after, 30, 40 plus years, then you know it's been refinished. But there's nothing that I'm seeing on this one that's giving me the heebie-jeebies. And most importantly, up our neck. Not even any finish played off. Impressive. And our headstock's looking perfect. No breaks, cracks, or repairs. Black lights are handy for showing where chips and nicks and dings out of the finish have occurred. So I would totally suggest anybody, even if you only buy or sell like 1 or 2 guitars a year, get yourself a black light. And it doesn't even have to be a big fancy one like me. I only have that because I'm trying to show you guys on film. So all said and done, replace bridge and tailpiece and other strap buttons. Not too bad, but it is a pretty chunky one at 10 pounds, 11 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how these T-tops sound. Man, I forgot how much I just love T-tops. Most of my collector guitars from the 70s always get the super humbucker, so it's nice to have a 70s/early 80s one that still has the T-tops in it. They're just such nice, beautifully clear pickups. They've got great clean tones to them. I will say these pots are the scratchiest pots I've ever come across. That's after working them for a while. Wait till you hear the tones. Neck. This is what I use to clean it out. It's pretty much what everybody says you should use. Moment of truth. Let's see if that worked. Nice. I was kind of expecting these pots just to be dying. Another thing electronically, this toggle switch isn't very easy to flip into the bridge position because your typical flip down just results it going back. But once you actually push it, it stays just fine. So it's not a toggle switch issue necessarily. But let's kick on some distortion. Now that we know all about the Cherry Sparkle Les Paul Standard from 1980, what are my final thoughts on this? This is one of the first standards from the Norlin era that I've really bonded with. I mean, typically, I go for the prehistorics. I think those are the best. But if you like the 70s and early 80s charm, maybe try a couple of them. I mean, this is the first one that I've really thought, okay, this is a good guitar. It needed a little bit of setup work. And yeah, it's got the whole rarity thing with the finish, so maybe that's why I like it. But this is a really comfortable neck, and I find the mellowed out T-top tones is exactly what I'm looking for in a guitar today. So I would highly suggest checking one of these out if you ever happen to find another one. And hey, if you own another Les Paul in one of these rare sparkle finishes, I would love to see it, even if it's not for sale. All right, Troglodytes, this one's in my personal collection, so yeah, I'm not selling it. But I hope you enjoyed checking it out with me anyways. We'll catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.
If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.